All right. I think we've given enough time for folks to log on, so I will welcome everyone again. And thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar titled Climate Data and Action, Strengthening Municipal Adaptation Initiatives. So before we dive in, I'm going to cover off a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be taking place in English with French interpretation available. To join the French interpretation, you can click the interpretation button on the lower right of your screen. It looks like a little globe. Aujourd'hui, la discussion se fera en anglais. Si vous
Today,
souhaitez
the
écouter
webinar
en
will take
français,
place in
veuillez
English. If you
cliquer
wish
sur
to
le
listen
bouton
in French, please
d'interprétation.
click on the
C'est en
interpretation
bas à
button.
droite de
It will be
votre
at the
écran.
bottom right
C'est un
of
petit
your
globe.
screen. It's a little globe.
Et sélectionnez le
Please
canal
select
français.
the French channel.
So, as we move through the presentations today, there will be 3 of them. You are encouraged as the audience to ask questions through the Q&A box in the language of your choice. Speakers will be addressing the questions at the very end of the webinar during a Q&A session that we will be holding. If there are some questions that can be easily addressed with a written response, our speakers might on occasion respond to some of the questions in the Q&A box, but not until they are done their presentation, so do keep an eye out for that. Apologies. A little bit of a funny mouse action happening there. So I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that I am joining you from Guelph in southwestern Ontario, built on the traditional lands of the Attawadarong and the Haudenosaunee, and located within the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I would also like to take a moment to reflect as we are approaching September 30th, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. September 30th also marks Orange Shirt Day, which is an Indigenous-led, grassroots commemorative day intended to raise awareness of the intergenerational impacts of residential schools on individuals, families, and communities. I'm going to take a moment to read a passage from the Orange Shirt Day site. The orange shirt has become a symbol of hope, reconciliation, and a commitment to a better future. So I would like to invite everyone to take a moment to reflect on that vision of hope for a better future and to think hard about what steps you'll commit to take on your own personal journey towards understanding and advancing reconciliation, whether you may be earlier in that journey like myself or further along. So thank you again for joining us today. My name is Bo Shane. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a project officer with the Green Municipal Fund. And I'm pleased to be your moderator today. I am joined by my colleagues, Louis Karangura, Jesse Granger, and Isabelle Oke, who will be running the webinar from the back end in our production room. Thank you very much. So today we're really thrilled to be taking a dive into climate data and adaptation. We'll be exploring how climate data can help support and also strengthen municipal plans and projects, in particular, climate adaptation initiatives. We hope that at the end of the hour with us, you will have gained insights into how to access and also effectively use climate data to support community adaptation plans and projects. And to achieve this objective, we will be aiming to answer the what, the why, and the how. Specifically, what is climate data? Why would a municipality or a municipal partner want to use climate data? And finally, How can climate data support and inform a municipal plan or project? So to help us answer these questions, we'll hear from three experts in the field. First, we'll hear from Casey Clunas, a policy analyst with Environment and Climate Change Canada. Casey will be providing an introduction to the Canadian Centre for Climate Services and the data portal, climatedata.ca. We will then hear from two municipal leaders who will share their experiences in applying climate data to municipal adaptation initiatives. Our municipal speakers include Sarah McRae, Manager of Climate and Energy from the County of Dufferin, and Jillian Prosser, leader of the climate adaptation team at the City of Calgary. Before I pass the mic over to our speakers, I would like to highlight that today's webinar is actually part of a broader webinar series offered by the Green Municipal Fund, also known as GMF. GMF aims to accelerate the transformation to resilient, net zero communities through a mixture of both funding and capacity building. We encourage you to check out the links in the chat to learn more about the Green Municipal Fund. I'm also very excited to highlight a recent addition to the funding opportunities under the Green Municipal Fund, the Local Leadership for Climate Adaptation Initiative. This aims to accelerate and scale local, equity-informed climate adaptation by supporting both knowledge and skills development while funding resilience planning and project implementation. This funding initiative is broken down into three streams shown on this slide: climate-ready plans and processes, adaptation and action, and financing adaptation. We encourage you to check out the links, again, being posted in the chat to learn more about these really exciting funding opportunities. Now, I'm about to pass the mic over to Casey. So I'm going to ask Casey to take control over the slides. Because I know that's going to take Casey a moment to do that, I'm going to take us through a very quick little reflection exercise. Because before we transition into the speaker portion of today, I'd like to take a moment to anchor us back to the focus for today's webinar, which is climate data. We're going to keep this very simple and very low tech. There won't be any polls being launched, but I would like to ask that everyone take a moment to pause and think back to a time when you checked the weather before a really big important day or a really big important event. And when you think back to that, did you check the temperature for the day? Did you check the temperature as it progressed over hour by hour? Did you look at the precipitation forecast? And if you're a big weather nut like me, did you also look at the wind speeds? And after you did that, did you adjust your plans or decide to do something different that day for that event? Next, I'd like for you to pause and think about a time when maybe you were running out of the house and you forgot to check the weather and you really regretted that you didn't check. So with that thought in mind, I'm going to pass the floor to our first speaker, Casey. And Casey, you can take it away when you are ready.
Awesome. Thanks, Bo. So hi, everyone. As Bo said, my name is Casey Clunas. I just want to start off today with a quick land acknowledgement for myself. So I currently reside in Ottawa, which is built on unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land that I'm grateful to be speaking to you from today. So I'll be covering a few things today, primarily speaking to climate data, why it's useful generally, but also with a bit of a municipal lens, where to access it, focusing primarily on climatedata.ca. So hopefully I can control the slides here. Great, okay. So before I dive into that, I just want to give you a bit of context as to who I am and where I'm speaking to you from. So I work for an organization called the Canadian Centre for Climate Services, or the CCCS, which you'll hear me refer to it as probably from here on out. We are a team within Environment and Climate Change Canada that provides Canadians with information and support to consider climate change in their decisions. So what that really means in a nutshell is that we help raise awareness around what climate data is and where and what is available. We facilitate access to that data by making it easier to find and more accessible for use. We work to provide guidance and training as well as products that help users understand and use data within their own decision-making processes. We serve all Canadians, so that means everyone from those working in public health, infrastructure and asset management, transportation, the financial sector, academia, and more. And so this also includes municipalities, which are actually a really large portion of our users, as municipalities across Canada are on the front lines of climate change impacts and are responsible for the management of a wide variety of things that are most impacted by climate change. So things such as public health, water and wastewater, asset management, utilities, public transportation, and more. So I won't be touching on the changes and impacts that we're already seeing as a result of climate change today. I just don't have the time, but I think we all know that the climate has already changed and will continue to in the future. It's likely that many of you have also experienced the impacts in your own communities, things like increases in extreme heat, extreme precipitation and storms, wildfires, and more. So in order to be resilient to these impacts, we need to adapt our infrastructure and our systems to be able to handle future impacts that our current systems may not be equipped to deal with. So to do this, we need climate data. We need to understand what the future climate might look like and what additional measures we may need to build into our systems in order to handle this future climate effectively. So the circle here on my slide represents a typical adaptation cycle. It can look a bit different depending on where you're seeing. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Okay, there we are. So it can look a bit different depending on where you're looking, but it will often contain similar elements. So step 2 you'll see on the slide is expanded on because the understand how climate will change step is where climate data fits in really well and where CCCS plays a key role in facilitating access to climate data. So I do want to clarify that while climate is a very critical component of adaptation, it's not the only component. Everyone's context is different, and that's why your expertise must come in, because you'll need to factor in how certain impacts will impact your community based on things like existing vulnerabilities, perhaps due to your geographic context or existing infrastructure or systems, as well as many, many other factors. All right, just get everything up here. So these days, the problem is not necessarily there's nowhere to go to find climate data and there's no climate data to be found. It's more that there are just so many good places to find climate data and which one should I use? So unfortunately, I won't be able to answer that question for everyone today, but it really does highlight the fact that you have many options. So the CCCS supports a range of regional climate service providers, many of which have data portals. So where you go for data really depends on things like what region you're in, what type of data you need, and what you're looking to do with the data. So I'll be taking a deeper dive into one of these portals today, climatedata.ca, which is a national level portal that has high resolution data for the whole country. So it serves a wide variety of needs for people all across Canada. If you have questions about regional climate service providers in your area, feel free to ask at the end or reach out using the contact information that will be shared at the end of my presentation. So jumping into climatedata.ca, climatedata.ca is a collaboration between Environment and Climate Change Canada and the Computer Research Institute of Montreal, as well as our network of regional climate service providers from across the country. So it was developed for users who require access to local climate data, including a range of climate indices and variables, and user-defined climate data sets for use in things like adaptation work, municipal adaptation work, engineering studies, research, education, and more. So it serves a pretty broad audience, including municipalities. So some of the key things, oops, I keep switching it accidentally. Just jump. Oh, I'm going in the wrong direction now. The mouse is doing funny things. Sorry about this. All right, we're back on track. So some of the key things it provides are Canada-wide climate data, like I mentioned, including both climate model projections, so future projections, as well as historical data. It allows users to explore these simulations of future climate under a range of emission scenarios and customize raw data for their own analysis if they need. It has a learning zone where users can learn more about the science behind climate data and how to choose and access climate data. And you can also download pre-made materials for your own training sessions. It currently has sector modules with examples of how climate data has been applied to assess risk and make adaptation decisions across Canada, and a news and update section where users can read blog posts about various climate-related topics and subscribe to the climatedata.ca newsletter. So as I mentioned, climatedata.ca offers high resolution climate data, meaning you can find data that is localized for your specific community or town. So you can search by location to find data for your town or community. You can select your variables of interest, things like hottest day, days above 25 degrees, minimum temperature, total precipitation, and many more. You can also adjust your timescale. So depending on your specific needs, maybe you don't need maybe you don't need data all the way up to the end of the century to 2100. So you can adjust that as needed. You can also adjust the time steps for which you see the data. So for example, maybe you don't need to know the annual hottest day, but you do want to know the hottest day over the summer months specifically. You can adjust that. You can select your emission scenario of interest, and you can visualize all of this data based on your selections, either as graphs or maps. And finally, you can download all of this data directly from the site, including images of the graphs or maps for things like presentations or reports. And you can download the raw data as well through like CSV files or NetCDF files if you want to do further analysis yourself. I'll get this right by the end of my presentation. So climatedata.ca can be beneficial for a range of users, from those who kind of know what data they want, they know what they need, how to access and use it, to those who are just starting their climate data journeys. So the Learning Zone offers a number of learning materials on various topics, including Climate Science 101 and Understanding Future Projections, as well as how to use climatedata.ca. So this is a really great place to start if you're just beginning to consider how you might be able to incorporate climate data into your work. We understand that many municipal staff are tasked with climate-related files or asked to consider climate change without necessarily being experts in that space. And so the Learning Zone exists to help anyone and everyone be a little bit more comfortable working with climate data. So now I'm just going to jump into some of the specific data sets and data products that we have available on climatedata.ca that might be relevant for municipal work. So the first one I want to highlight is our humidex projections. So this is one of our more recent data sets that we've added to climatedata.ca. If you are from Southern Ontario like I am, you'll be very familiar with the impacts of humidity. But if you're from certain parts of the prairies, sorry, it seems to just be moving on its own some of these times. If you're from certain parts of the prairies, or perhaps somewhere in the north, you may not have experienced extreme humidity before. So humidex impacts the comfortability of heat and can have big impacts on human health. Typical temperature projections don't actually account for humidity, but this data set has addressed that. So now you can see what temperatures with those humidex values might look like in the future. So if you work in public health, for example, or if you work with vulnerable communities or outdoor workforces, you may be interested in this data set. So the next one I want to highlight is the building climate zones. So as some of you are probably familiar, climate is a major component of building design and energy performance, and most regulations for buildings have been based on historical climate values. So with a changing climate, this can have serious impacts on the ability of buildings to function efficiently or withstand future climate conditions. As you can see in the animation, which hopefully is coming across, there are building zones emerging in the southern parts of the country with climates that haven't necessarily even existed in Canada in the past. So this is a kind of a graph over time out to the end of the century. And that indicates that we may need to adjust the approach of basing building regulations on past climate because it's no longer a great indicator of what the future climate might be. So if you're someone who works with public assets or buildings generally, this data set may be useful for you. So the last one that I want to highlight here is our spatial analogs tool. So this is one of our most recent additions to the site. This tool takes the climate characteristics historically experienced in one city and looks at the projections for its future. So you can select your city, for example, and what climate variables you're interested in seeing projections for, say days above 30 degrees, for example. And it will compare that to a city that currently experiences what those future conditions for your city might look like. So this can be useful for understanding how communities are already dealing with things like extreme heat, for example. If your town is projected to have an increase in days above 30 degrees, which you historically aren't accustomed to dealing with, the spatial analogs tool could be a way of finding another city that currently does deal with days above 30 on a regular basis and allow you to explore what their solutions are and help you plan for the future. So that's just one example, but there are a few different ways this can be used. That you can fiddle around with the variables of interest, as well as the timeframes and the emission scenarios. So at this point, you might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed. That is a lot of information that I've just kind of thrown your way. And so to help you feel a little bit less alone in this journey, I just wanted to highlight this tool, the Map of Adaptation Actions. So this is a collection of examples of communities and sectors from across Canada who are adapting to a changing climate. So there are actually hundreds of examples of adaptation taken by communities specifically on the map, many of which will speak to the ways in which they incorporated climate data into their own decision-making processes. So I encourage you to check out the map, explore, find examples of communities that have faced impacts that are similar to what your own community is seeing or expected to see what steps they've taken, and perhaps take some inspiration from that. Or you can look around for neighboring communities and see if anyone you know might be on the map. So before I wrap up, I just want to end with this slide here, which basically just links to the social accounts for climatedata.ca. Feel free to give them a follow. We also have a newsletter that goes out monthly, and you can subscribe to that if you're interested in staying up to date with the latest data sets that we're adding to climatedata.ca. I think there should be a link in the chat for both of those things. And the very last thing I want to highlight is some contact information here. So if we didn't answer your questions today, if you have some in the future, feel free to reach out. The email at the top here, the CCCS generic email, you can send an email anytime. This will go to our support desk, so they can help you with any climate data related questions. If you don't know where to start, or if you have very specific data questions, they're a really great resource. Or you can just send me an email directly and I can put you in touch with whoever might be able to help answer your question. So I think with that, I'll pass it over to Bo. Sorry for the slide difficulties. I will relinquish my control. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Casey. Ed, please, no worries at all. I also was having a bit of trouble. It seems to be very sensitive to my mouse. Thank you for that. I really appreciated that you started off by highlighting that there are so many places to find climate data, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. And for highlighting the fact that anyone can reach out to your team to be connected with regional climate services and to figure out and sort through all those different data portals. You covered so much today, and it's really exciting to see all of the new resources that are being added to climatedata.ca all the time, the human X predictions and the building climate zones and spatial analogs. It's all really exciting to see this resource just continue to grow. And finally, I really appreciated that you touched on the map of adaptation actions. It's also a really great resource. I've loved digging around for case stories, case studies in that resource, so thank you. I will now pass the floor over to Sarah. I don't know if Sarah is able to take control of the slides, and if she's comfortable doing so. I'm sure that we can do so if you'd prefer, Sarah. Just I'll suggest you turn on your camera and unmute first, perhaps, because that can sometimes be easier to do before.
Yes, I have to unmute first. Thank you. Okay. It says I have control, but it's not moving. Ah, there we are. Okay. Thanks, Bo. Hey, everybody. So I'm Sarah McCrae. I'm the manager of the Climate and Energy Division at the County of Dufferin. Dufferin County is an upper tier municipality in Ontario, located about an hour north of Toronto, where I'm calling from. So Dufferin resides within the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Tianotani, Attawandaron, and Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples. So today I wanted to talk about Dufferin's adaptation journey and planning and implementation. In 2023, we passed our climate adaptation strategy called Together for Change, and it includes an action plan that covers both community and corporate initiatives. In creating this strategy, it was developed in collaboration with ICLEI Canada through their Advancing Adaptation program using the BARC framework. People may be familiar with that framework, but BARC stands for Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities framework. It's a 5-step planning tool designed to help local governments prepare for the impacts of climate change. So in our working group, which included members from diverse fields such as conservation authorities, engineering, operations, and emergency management, among many others, they all contributed their expertise to assess climate impacts. So they helped us evaluate the likelihood of each of these events happening and their potential consequences. So this collaborative effort allowed us to prioritize key areas of risk and shape a comprehensive action plan. As in the spirit of this webinar, for the data action piece of this, we relied on local expertise and experience to help us create our risk assessment. We also used data and climate modeling to visualize the potential future scenarios. So the sources we consulted are listed on the slide here in case you went over one of those. And wherever possible, we employed an ensemble approach, which involved running multiple climate models simultaneously. So research has shown that the method can provide a more accurate projection of future annual and seasonal temperatures, as well as precipitation compared to using a single model. So that was, again, in support with ICLEI Canada staff. Oh, I was going crazy too. So we ended up in our plan with 5 priority areas: building and infrastructure, energy and economy, agriculture and natural environment, people and health, and enabling actions. Of course, I'm not going to go through everything that's in our plan, but I wanted to highlight a couple of projects within our adaptation strategy that are different stages of readiness. Even though they're both actions within the strategy, they're really at different places, just to give people an idea about what you would need to do for each of these. So one of our key objectives in our buildings and infrastructure priority area is to strengthen the risk of corporate assets and infrastructure against climate-related risks. So under this objective, we have an action to develop a road resiliency program. However, to initiate the program, we realized that we actually needed more data. Specifically, we had a significant gap in understanding the risks that face our road infrastructure. So the information we need is really crucial to prioritizing which road areas to focus on, identifying projects for our capital plans, and adjusting our road maintenance practices to adapt to climate change. So, for example, we recognize that we would need some thermal mapping of our road network completed. That would help us determine where to optimize the application of brining liquids to reduce ice to allow for more efficient and effective material use, which again, may be changing in the climate that we're expected to see. So the next step in this project to really, again, build upon a new plan is to conduct a climate risk assessment on our road infrastructure to get more detail. So this study is very much in its early stages, but will provide invaluable insights for shaping future road capital plans and maintenance standards. So while the road resiliency program is an action in our strategy, it's essentially setting the groundwork for creating a more detailed plan. Very governmental plans on plans. So the next section here is the people and health. One of our directives is to strengthen social infrastructure and to better manage and reduce climate health related and safety risks for residents. We aim to achieve this by improving community connectivity, which will help boost emergency response capacity during climate-related emergencies. So while this action is intentionally broad, it does give us the flexibility to explore more creative solutions and seize any new opportunities for implementation. So a project that supports this action that we'll be working on, and can be implemented in the short term is the creation of a community resilience hub. So this is a project is being piloted in support with staff from the Ontario Resource Centre for Climate Adaptation. The aim of this is to design and install a outdoor structure that serves as a trusted neighborhood location, meeting both the everyday physical and social needs of the community while enhancing resiliency during times of disruption and recovery. So resilience hubs are critical spaces that can bridge multiple areas of community strength and preparedness. It helps to integrate efforts in community resilience, emergency preparedness, climate change mitigation, and social equity. So with the growing challenges of climate disruptions and all of the social inequity that we see, resilience hubs can really play that vital role in helping communities become self-sufficient and capable of thriving before, during, and after disruptions. So some of the key benefits that we've seen in other places with resilience hubs around public health, wellness, and safety. So improving public health, making sure there's that connectivity piece, community building, the social equity part, which I mentioned, making sure that the spaces there that are designed to be inclusive, and the hubs can ensure that all community members, especially those that are the most vulnerable, have access to necessary resources and support. And then the civic engagement piece as well. So they offer residents opportunities to engage in civic activities and participate in community decision making. So you say, what could a resilience hub look like? So we think about this in 3 different types of modes. So everyday mode in the resilience hub serves as a multifunctional community space. So it's about 99% of the time it will be this. But it could offer bookable space event areas, a bike repair station, basic first aid supplies, for instance. Community members could also engage with art and educational installations, accessing digital and physical bulletin boards, using emergency phone or beacon for safety. There's lots of different things that it could look like there. We're also thinking about rain harvesting features and natural habitat creation and what these could look like depending on where the space is. Now, when a crisis hits, the hub shifts into disruption mode, which can become a family meeting spot, a place to distribute emergency supplies like water and other resources, and provide a spot for critical communications where they're maintained through an emergency phone, beacon, or radio, and perhaps providing weather and emergency alerts. And then during recovery mode, the hub continues to support the community by offering mental health programs, community services, and resource distribution, helping people recover and rebuild after a disruption. So here are some designs from a Toronto-based project called Parks in Action. You can Google those. They've done some great work. These are just some examples of what a resilience hub could potentially look like. In addition to the insights gained from our community engagement, the design will also be shaped by climate data. So for instance, Dufferin County is expected to experience prolonged periods of extreme heat. So we'll want to probably incorporate features such as shaded areas, drinking water access, and possibly a misting station. Now, it's important to note that the hub is not intended to replace cooling centers, heating centers, or emergency response centers, but rather to really serve as that everyday community resource when people are out within the community. However, we're also expecting this to be a blueprint project. So in addition to creating the pilot hub, the first one, we aim to develop a guidebook to support the expansion of resilience hubs across Dufferin County. And they may occur in inside locations or outside locations, such as municipal offices, libraries, community centers, places of worship, and more. So because these resilience hub really offer this holistic approach to community empowerment, combining emergency preparedness with everyday community building and social justice efforts, to guide the vision and implementation of these hubs, we have established two advisory groups. Well, one advisory group, two tables. The first one being a community advisory table made up of diverse members who will advise the vision for the space, ensuring that anti-racism, equity, inclusion, and reconciliation are integrated into the design and purpose of the hub, and a public service review table to provide input on the logistics of construction, safety considerations, accessible, inclusive design standards. And finally, people always want to know about timelines. Regarding the timelines of the project, we're currently in the engagement phase of this. So by early next year, we aim to have 3 designs ready, which will be developed based on community feedback. We'll then present these designs to the community and hold a vote to decide which of the designs will be for construction in 2025. Left my email up there in case it will answer all the questions at the end of the webinar, but it's listed here in case you want to connect outside of this. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for covering a lot in a pretty short amount of time. I did really appreciate that you kicked things off by zooming out to your larger adaptation strategy, showing your 5 priorities and explaining that the projects you spoke to today really touch on 2 of the priorities in that larger framework. I have to say that I'm pretty excited to see how your community resilience hub evolves and takes shape. I did appreciate that you flagged and highlighted that is not meant to replace heating and cooling centers, so that it is a community resilience hub, which is a separate service, or at least that's the plan. So thank you so much for that. And I will see if Jillian is ready to take the floor.
Okay, let's see. There. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jillian Prosser. I'm speaking from the city of Calgary, and I'll give you a presentation that is a little bit similar to what Sarah is doing in Dufferin County, and I think it goes to speak to how municipalities across the country are using similar tools, developing similar strategies, and putting in place similar implementation practices. I'll begin with a land acknowledgement. I'm honored to be speaking from the original confluence where the Bow and the Elbow rivers meet. It has been known as Mokinstis, Wickstabi Gutstis, and Utasquini before it was known as Calgary by Scottish settlers. It's on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, made up of the Siksika by Kainai, Omiskabugani Kainai First Nations, the Ithnika Nakota Wickstabi First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. The city of Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis, District 5 and 6, and we acknowledge and respect the histories, languages, and diverse cultures of the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit, and are grateful for their connections that continue to enrich our communities. At the City of Calgary, we've identified through a process of climate data collection, processing, analysis, risk assessment, that we have a number of key climate hazards. We've looked at specifically these 8 key climate hazards in Calgary, and we've worked to understand which hazards are most likely to impact us, who and what is most likely to be vulnerable to these climate hazards, and what consequences may be experienced. We see that our summer temperatures are increasing. We have more and more extreme heat, days over 29 degrees Celsius, nights that don't cool below 14 degrees. We've seen year over year increasing wildfire smoke, and we understand that with the climate change that we're seeing and the conditions for wildfires, particularly in British Columbia, the forested lands in Alberta and the north, we experience a lot of wildfire smoke sometimes in the summers. Drought is a key climate hazard. There was a lot of work done early this year as our drought conditions were looking quite severe as we left the winter and moved into spring thaw. We're very fortunate to have some good seasonal rainfall so that drought conditions were not experienced to much degree in Calgary. We have, of course, experienced river flooding in 2013, 2005, and we continue to understand that'll be a risk that is changing with climate change. We do have heavy rainfall events, short duration intensity storms that can flood roads and basements and key corridors for transportation, different facilities. With those heavy rainfall events, often we will have severe storms. Calgary just experienced the second most damaging hailstorm, coming on the heels of the most damaging hailstorm. Or sorry, we now have had the most damaging just after we had the most damaging one in 2020. There was over $2.5 billion in insurable damages from the hailstorm in this summer of 2024. We see winter storms continue to be a threat. And the idea of shifting seasonality and what that means for our health and our infrastructure, the population of pests and diseases and invasive species, we've used the climate data and the projections available to better understand how all of these hazards are shifting due to climate change. Knowing that these hazards are shifting and what the City of Calgary has to manage as a municipality, we developed the Calgary Climate Strategy Pathways to 2050. And the adaptation section looks at key themes of people, built infrastructure, natural environment, and water. And that water component is both our source water and our drinking water, but also our flood risk, our drought risk, and items like that. So these are the kinds of areas under which we've developed our adaptation plan and the implementation measures that we're working on. These were all informed by our understanding of climate projections, which hazards were going to be most damaging, the known areas of impact, and what our key municipal responsibilities are as a city. One tool that we've put together to assist in our planning is the Community Climate Risk Index. So we have used a series of indices, about 40 different indices, ranging from StatsCan data to asset condition data, to start to build that understanding of which climate hazards, in what locations, and who and what are vulnerable, whether that's vulnerability in our people and our communities and our Calgarians, how their health and well-being will be impacted, whether it's vulnerability on our infrastructure and the natural environment. So this is one of the key data-driven tools that we are using to better understand where in the city and which communities are most at risk. This approach allows us to understand baseline climate risk, and we can help to develop measures and both on planning, design, infrastructure development that can start to reduce this risk across the city. As time goes by, we've been able to look at kind of current baseline state 2050s, and we have pushed to the 2080s. We see increasing risk, obviously, with climate change. This layers onto our understanding of social equity and the impacts that different community members feel with climate change. This information can be drilled down to a community level. This is an example for the Sun Alta community, where we start to understand which components of vulnerability are key to addressing climate risk in this community. So we're able to look at some of the top drivers of climate vulnerability are visible minorities, unemployment rates, recent immigrants, and the percentage of land cover with paved surfaces. So it's a central Calgary community, fairly densely developed and undergoing some shifts in community members and folks who are choosing to make Sunalta their home. So one of the community-led initiatives in that area that has been supported by the City of Calgary as well as many other partners to help build capacity and resilience is the Sunalta Community Hub. So this is very much the same resilience hub concept. The City of Calgary, or in Calgary, there's a hub initiative as a three-way partnership between the United Way, the City of Calgary, and the Rotary Clubs of Calgary. 5 community hubs are being activated in priority locations across the city. Although each hub is unique to the community it serves, they share 4 key features. They are welcoming and inclusive spaces. They are intended to engage residents in the design and the activation of the hub. They provide access to support and services and provide platforms to spark community economic development. A key feature in the Sunalta Community Hub is that climate data was used to assess the future climate change heating and cooling demands in the building to better understand building performance and comfort looking forwards. Building design was influenced, including in the energy system and the physical building envelope, so the roofing and the exterior, to better understand and meet the future demands on the building. So rather than creating this hub for a climate that we no longer have, this is being built for the climate that we are inheriting and are looking towards into the future. So this hub will be an amenity that supports the Sunalta community now and into the future. The specifics of the measures that have been implemented to support greenhouse gas mitigation, the roofing insulation was doubled and had some increase in thermal retention that way. The wall insulation and thermal performance of windows and skylights were improved, and the first stage heating changed from a gas-fired furnace to a variable refrigerant flow system. The adaptation measures that coordinate with those are those increased thermal performance of the building through the upgrades to the roof, wall, and window elements, and mechanical cooling was enhanced by that variable refrigerant flow system. In Calgary, unlike in other places across Canada, cooling in public and community buildings is still not standard, but we are recognizing that with each passing summer, cooling is becoming more and more necessary, particularly in locations and in facilities that support vulnerable populations, including the elderly and young children. This purpose-built facility will include a commercial kitchen, coffee shop, and programming spaces. It is a social enterprise with the income it generates going back into the community, allowing the hub to continue offering events, programs, and services. This project was in part made possible by the City of Calgary Centralized Climate Fund, so it was able to support the building envelope and mechanical upgrades that were added to the original design of this building. In the City of Calgary, we're using climate data to better plan, to better understand risk, and to develop designs that integrate adaptation at all levels. We use data-driven tools to understand risk to the community level in conjunction with more qualitative and narrative-based methods of learning about how our communities experience the impacts of climate change. We do a lot of work in trying to organize climate resilient community working groups and understanding through our communications and our engagement processes how people are impacted and what it is that they are feeling that they need to be better supported in the changing climate. Through this approach, we're trying to support implementation measures that reduce climate risk to all Calgarians. And in this specific community-driven project, we are happy to note that both greenhouse gas mitigation and adaptation measures were embedded to center climate action within this community. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you so much, Jillian, for that presentation. again, it was nice to see the larger picture starting out with your larger adaptation plan. Interesting to see the way the buckets look very similar to Dufferin's, and was really great to hear about your resilience hub and to hear the differences and similarities. A lot of communities are looking at building community resilience hubs right now. And so it's a really great project to hear about in depth and to hear about all the building upgrades that have been made specifically in line with that project. And the Community Climate Risk Index map is really exciting to see you zooming into a really small geographic scale. I'm sure there's a lot of challenges associated with that, but a lot of benefits that come from being able to make decisions about a specific neighborhood. So thank you very much. All right, I'm going to take control of the slides and cross my fingers that goes smoothly. And wonderful. Okay. So thank you so much to all three of our speakers, Casey, Sarah, and Jillian. We'll now take some time to answer some of the questions that have been put into the Q&A box. If you have any questions, but you've not yet put them in the Q&A box, please do add them now. I'm going to take a moment to just let the audience know that I've been told by my colleagues in the production room that there were a few links posted in the chat that you weren't able to copy and paste. And so they're working on resharing those links to make sure that they are something that you can click on and open up. So keep an eye on the chat box for those updated links. So before going to the Q&A box, I do have one quick question that I'm going to use to kick off the Q&A portion of today's talk. This question is perhaps a little bit more geared towards Sarah and Jillian, but I do think, Casey, that you might have some insight as well from working with municipalities. But I'm wondering, when your municipal teams first started to use climate data for the purposes of informing municipal work, I'm thinking really early days when you're still newbies to this, did you encounter any challenges that you had to overcome or that were just too big to overcome? And I'm wondering if they have any lessons learned for anyone in the audience who might be newer to using climate data, or some things you might have done differently looking back. And Casey, you might have some insights from working with municipalities who are newer to using climate data. And I'll just open it up to anyone who might want to share any lessons learned or insights on that idea of just starting to use climate data for municipal work and being sort of maybe a little bit overwhelmed by all the options out there.
I could offer one thought. A challenge that we found is understanding range and knowing how many ranges of data, potential future projections, timing, what is most descriptive and reasonable to plan for or to discuss, while acknowledging that it may not be accurate. It may that distinction between precision and accuracy and range are, for people who are not technical experts in this kind of field, are hard to wrap their minds around. So that was an early stage, and I would say a continuing stage challenge that we work through.
I can maybe echo that a little bit, in that for us, that was certainly a part of the challenge. I mean, again, we were lucky enough to be working with some staff from ICLEI Canada who were kind of our personal experts on this to help guide us through it. But I think for a lot of the conversations we had with municipal staff was very much like, well, how do you know for sure? And it's like, well, you don't necessarily. That's why we have, these different types of models and all of these ranges. But, kind of how I think I referred to it at the time was, it's directionally accurate. And so we know, even when we're looking at our actions, these are the things we have to do. The slight little changes that maybe, again, we don't know the future, but those little tiny, degrees maybe of difference, like we may have, we're looking at 15 consecutive 30-degree plus days instead of 14, like, does that one day really matter? I think it's really about the actions that you are looking to do and put in place to address it all. So said directionally accurate is what we needed to do.
I'll just add really quickly, because I don't have the experience, obviously, from the municipal side of things, but I do have it from, just getting the questions and providing the data side of things. And I think it's easy for us as the providers to overlook the training and guidance and support that needs to go along with data. It is a really complicated and technical topic. And so we're spending, I think, a lot more time now ensuring that data sets and data products come with training or guidance or support documents of some sort to make them more usable and not as like scary and frightening for people who aren't experts in the space. And so that's something that we're constantly trying to get better at. It's still obviously a work in progress, but working on that for sure.
Thank you, everyone, for that. I am looking at the first question in the chat box, the Q&A box, that is, and I'm realizing that I think it's already been answered. Shannon, I feel like what Casey just mentioned in terms of trying to provide more guidance around ranges and how to make those decisions, what questions to be asking up front might help answer that question. If you don't feel it's been answered, you can maybe add another one at the bottom. So I'm going to move on to the question from Ernesto here. And this looks like this question's for Jillian. How does Calgary plan to integrate its climate resilience strategy with other strategies such as technological innovative cities and smart cities? Thanks.
We do actively work with teams that are engaged on some of the tech and the smart cities. We do a lot of work with our internal group who are our technical geodatabase spatial analytics experts. We do keep in a lot of contact. Sorry, I'm trying to find the question. I saw it here. Did it vanish? How to integrate it. Yeah. So we work to integrate across the board, and we do have teams that we have connections within those other teams.
Thank you so much. I am getting a little nudge from my production team, letting me know that it's important that we wrap up on time today so we can get everyone on their way. I will note that a lot of the questions were answered in the chat box. If you click on the answered section, I can see that our speakers have been going in and providing written responses. So thank you very much for that. All right, so I'm going to move on to our closing slides. Thank you everyone for joining us. Before we wrap up, in a moment, you're going to see a new window pop up on your screen. It's a very short and anonymous poll, and we'd very much appreciate your taking a bit of time to provide some feedback using this poll to us. This slide here shares different ways of staying in touch with us. If you're not already registered to FCM Connect, we highly encourage you to do that. The middle link there speaks to our local leadership for climate adaptation initiative that we spoke to near the beginning. And at the very bottom, that's one way of getting in touch with us directly. I mentioned that this webinar is part of a broader webinar series. And so we'd just like to take a moment to encourage you to either use the QR code on the screen or the link in the chat to sign up for our next webinar on October 10th at 2 p.m. titled Making Sustainable Land Use Decisions in Your Municipality. So thank you so much to all of our speakers today for generously sharing your time and knowledge. It was so incredibly appreciated. I know that we packed a lot into a very short amount of time. So thank you so much. Thank you also to our audience members for joining in. And I wish everyone a lovely, lovely day. Thank you.